Right, this one's actually sad for me if you know like my perspective, and I'm not even trying to just be like some like doomer
Go on.
because like this is and Europeans will understand this, okay? And I think this is what's happening. The LPL is actually getting worse and worse and worse versus like the context of like China. Like the region is
Okay.
actually getting like worse, not better. And what's staving it off is like JDG and BLG, which are like the exceptions that prove the rule, and they're basically the G2 of this region a little bit right now. Because they're like G2 is doing really, really well. Like, sorry, BLG is doing really, really well versus the field and showing like good matchups into like against like the LCK. But the other teams throughout the year are like proven to be like highly problematic, particularly the middling like teams of like the LPL. Like I actually think like Weibo Gaming and LNG like at Worlds weren't particularly good, and they didn't look like not so much like dark horses, but like they like weren't going to like do anything against like
Okay.
HLE, like T1. Like you can go check on my show. I actually predicted T1 to win the finals. I actually didn't even think it was going to be. I was surprised on how close it was. I
Okay.
thought like T1, Gen.G, and HLE were by far the best teams. I think BLG were fourth by like a considerable margin. And I'm actually and obviously if you see all like the doomer news that I don't like put much stock into about how the LPL works and all that, it's just kind of like another year of like, is the LPL going to get like the right concentration of like talents to like rival what the LCK is able to produce? Because like the LCK, even when it's like you have like the flawed like gem teams, their floor is so high where like the flawed gem teams in the LPL are like all over the place, like OMG, Weibo Gaming, what do you call it? Anyone's Legend, like midway through it. So like it's a really strange thing. I just don't see like what the next like rising like squad or team or like core is. It's kind of just like you hope to God that you can get Knight plus a bunch of other people on like a good team, and that team's good, right? Because it's always good. And then you've got the other parts have got to try and get it together. Like it's a testament to the strength of the internals of the region. But JDG talent hogged like 3 players this year that were like unbelievable, right? But that was it. Like, what is like BLG going to like do or like improve? They've parted with his ruler now. We don't even know if like Canavi's going to continue. So I just don't see what the next like squad or combination of talent is going to be, because the LCK could look lots of different ways and still be really, really, really
So
sick.
basically, you don't think like in 2025 there will be the equivalent of a BLG or last year's JD. There won't be like a true super team type mega squad for you.
I think there might be like one, but like
Right.
last year the LPL sent 3 really good teams. BLG, LNG, and and JDG were all really, really good last Worlds. Like I don't care about like the end result.
Okay.
All 3 of those teams were really, really good.
Yeah, yeah.
They were all super legit. This year they sent, in my opinion, one super legit team. Like 2 Worlds at the point of like Providence, they sent BLG, and the rest of the teams I really didn't think were that good compared to the LCK. Like what the LCK sent in terms of those top 3 teams were unbelievable. Like going in, like T1 obviously were the most like fickle in terms of like going into the tournament. They didn't look the best after going 5 games with KT, but like after a couple of the games in like group stages and watching them like play, you're like, right, it's happening. They're looking pretty good, and then you know the first like the quarterfinals, and it's like yeah, they look really, really good. So I'm not even trying to be like a doomer because I know the LPL super well. I just don't know what the next combination, like what the next like talent like solution like is, because they've tried so many different combinations, and they just can't seem to find like the correct like magic sauce. It's a little bit sad. The region's still mega fun to watch. I'm gonna keep watching it. It's just about it being the best, like the LPL overtaking the LCK or getting like the 3 or 4 like great teams. I just don't see it this year. I know a lot of people are excited for the off season, but I'm a bit tentative about where it's gonna go.
I think there is even a reframing to do, because I tend to agree with what you said, because I think like we kind of lived through the same thing in a worse situation in Europe, and I think that's NA. I mean, it's past that, right? It's at the point where the league has a different shape. It's much closer to a minor region at this point. I think that the problem, it's like the celebration. What makes Faker and T1 so good, right, is as well what plagues a little bit the industry. Because if you look at all the storylines outside of the old SKT versus Samsung Galaxy or T1 versus Gen.G, right? If you put these 2 teams aside, the rest of the world has been fighting for Worlds for 4 years. All the storylines that you do know, like LPL being a contender to win Worlds, the Damwon era, G2 being a contender to win Worlds, all these things pretty much happen during the 4 years. T1 was rebuilding and Gen.G was rebuilding. The rest has been pretty much just a fight between two teams. It's just the history of SKT and the history, right? The legacy of SKT. And Gen.G still taking over today, right? Like we haven't been past Faker. And so you're in a position where the only thing that can beat these rosters produced by Korea is the Korean salary cap. Like the only hope for end of this like total domination of the League of Legends esports industry by the legacy of T1 and the legacy of Samsung Galaxy is literally just the salary cap, because I don't think Korea is going to be able to maintain T1 nor produce a second HLE. I know like the guys and Gen.G, the players, although Gen.G is like I think the third most expensive team in Korea, and player consented to have a lower salary to play together. I think this type of talent concentration is not going to happen as much in Korea anymore. But I think, to your point, that there is a clear imbalance, fundamental imbalance in the production of talents between Korea and the rest of the world. It kind of like, we thought it was fixed with like the emergence of people like Knight and Ben. But overall, right, and I think the support point is a really good proof of that from Thorin. Like, yeah, there's not such as a top level support in China. I don't think Korea is matched whatsoever. I think that we are pretty much, the gap is now not closing, but it's like increasing between Korea and China and the rest of the world is as well increasing. So you have these kind of islands, you know, floating on their own. And the state of the future of League of Legends, and kind of come back to the hot take I've made, I think it was 2 episodes ago when I was like, or 1 episode ago, if T1 wins, it's great for the T1 fans, it's great for the legacy, it's great on the moment, but what do we move forward with coming for the next years? Because you look at like these T1, even if they don't, right, they kind of part ways and they scatter across Korea. Korea still has like 300 or 400 more talents than anyone else in the world. And they're going to be able to produce at least 2 or 3 top-level competitive teams. Whereas in China, you can shuffle Yagao and Knight one more time and maybe get like aiming back or something or missing. But you know the level of players they have, and you know it's not enough versus the people that are in Korea. So the future looks pretty sad for me, because this T1 roster, the only thing that's going to beat it is actually the Korean salary cap. Like, you never see a team beat that roster at Worlds. And we don't even have the time to produce contenders, because the only thing that's going to make them part away is the Korean salary cap. And that's kind of how the story ends.
I will say, by the way, that is the thing where I always feel sorry for people whose only esports game is League of Legends. Because I can tell you, one of the most satisfying things if you're a fan of a game like Counter-Strike is not only do all the teams play each other regularly, but you never get what you just set up there, Zabati. You never get a thing of like, and this was the most unbeatable team ever. But in fact, the only time ever you could say this happened was technically the Na'Vi team that was on top when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Technically, people say that sort of limited it, because obviously all the players, like half of them were Russian, half of them were Ukrainian. If people don't know, you can imagine that added like a strain to them winning, and they weren't the best after that. But aside from that, in history, in Counter-Strike, we basically always dethrone our champions. Like, we get to see, like, when an era ends, you lose, you go to a major and you get banged in, or you have 3 or 4 tournaments where you don't beat that rival team. But I have to agree, the shittest thing about League is the idea that if they like break this lineup up now, well, first of all, even if they break this lineup up, no one ever gets a chance to properly dethrone this team at Worlds. That sucks. You don't know, like, would they ever have lost? But then also, similarly, let's say they kept this lineup together and it was still good. Well, now you'd also think, like Zabatine just said, maybe that's because Gen.G and Hanwha Life had to like shed a contract or get a cheaper player or get a rookie. That does kind of suck. I'm with you on that one. The problem is, on the take of like the LPL being worse, I agree and I don't agree. Here's where I agree, Kira. It is worse because, like I just said about the support problem, it does seem like every lineup, and the only reason I think BLG doesn't get counted in this is because on paper, BLG and last year's JDG, 2 of the only lineups I've ever seen from China where every player was really good in general. Even then, by the way, I think it's aged fabulously. I was one of the people coming into this world who wasn't an unbeliever, by the way. I think I ranked him very low on my team. I didn't even like, bro, I think I had him on like the C or B tier, and everyone else was telling me like I have a lot of respect, by the way, for like Cadriel and Dot. Bro, they were having him like fucking top, like, I can't believe it top was 3 or something insane, like, like top 2 support in the world. I was like, what? Bro, this guy's a serial inter, but okay. So, whatever. I guess they're just taking the upside of his play, you know? So I do think that, but I would phrase it this way, Key-Ray. The saddest thing is, I agree on the salary cap angle, but the problem I hate about the LPL to this day is this. right? It only is the case that essentially, I'll give you, here's the quick analogy. You know, famously, the reason why Americans try to argue that they're like capitalist free market system is not in any way a free market system, by the way. It's basically like an oligarchy, but okay. If you imagine they had a free market, what they tried to argue is that in a free market, this is a classic capitalist argument. They say the reason it works is if we're all trying to be selfish, it'll sort of even out. And in the end, like we'll have to like work together on business deals, for example. So we can be selfish, but in the end it works. That doesn't work for roster construction. Because what happens in the LPL, I think it's the LPL has the, here's the take for you. LPL's problem, Kira, is they've been like last year's LEC the whole time. If you actually said your mission, the LPL, isn't make a bunch of lineups, it's just beat the LCK and win worlds, you'd never make these rosters except like JDG or except maybe BLG, because what they always do instead is they take what, here's the difference. All the best players in the LCK play in the top 5 teams. Like, all of them. Bro, even like BDD's on like the 5th or 6th best team. Like, all the best players. There's not a single truly great player. Like, back in the day, you had like Keen and Summit were off on like the shitter team. Yep. That doesn't exist in the LCK now. They do a really good job of talent stacking. LPL is a criminal for talent stacking. The LPL will take like, unironically, like, the 30 best LPL players and put them on 8 teams. And you're like, bro, what? Like, again, like I've always said, the great example is like Jackie. It's like, why has he got Paolan and Mark as his support in a region where even if we're talking about not having supports, you've got Ming and Mako, and you can keep going. Like, bro, they're never pairing these players. So I think part of it's GMing, unfortunately. Like, if you notice, they even seem in the LPL to make what I think is the worst style of GMing, which is you always announce a massive name. You'd be like, I've got Ruler. And so every fan's like, oh my God, we've got Ruler, we're going to win worlds. And then it's like they'll quietly be like, and he's partnered with Mark, and you're like, no, what the fuck? Why are you even getting him then? Like, you know, like if I'm like, that's like the worst fucking like bait and switch of all time, but that is what they do every off-season, bro. In fact, I even admit this fully. I will totally admit it. Every time they make a sick roster in the LPL, there's always one name where I go, I guess that's all right. Ignore that. Get back to the Soul Laners. Soul Laners. Yeah, oh, sick. Look at this. Is amazing. There's always one scuff name. Like, I'll give you an example. Even that fucking Weibo lineup, which was like, wasn't even that great anyway. Like, you're just compromising. You're like, Breathe could be good if it's a Renekton. You know, why am I doing that? They're supposed to be going to Worlds. Like, so I sort of agree. I agree with the bigger picture. But there's the problem, though. I also think, I'll spin it one last way though. This is the way I'll spin it at the end. It goes like this. You are right. It's actually going to be a lot harder to win from the LPL because, spoiler, they've tried all the super teams and so far, by the way, not many of the super teams won. But it's actually going to be worse. But here's how you have to spin it to still make sanity worth maintaining, Keyray. Technically, it is actually way better for someone like Knight, though. Because here's the pack. I know how angles work, mate. I do that thing like, if people know the character from The Authority, the Midnight, I imagine what the angle will be before the result. Here's what people don't realise. Imagine that BLG had won that tournament, Keyray. You do realise, you're imagining in your world, right? Cool, now we can have all these cool conversations, right? Is Knight the modern day great player? No, everyone would just say this to you, Keyray. They'd go, he had all the best players. Now, he didn't, but I'll tell you what, Bin's pretty insane. I think fucking Elk's pretty good. Again, I'm not a biggest On fan, but some people would say he was... they would say he had too much help. In a weird way, it will actually force Chovy and Knight to be even more cracked out to win, though, if you know what I mean, because they'll probably have to be even more of a carry.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.